G'day Bruce, welcome to a few minutes for the champion.
Now, great Simon, great to be here with you, yeah.
That's good. Well, we're here today in Brisbane at the Ekka, 2018, wood chopping arena. Wood chopping has a great heritage in Australia. How did you become involved in it?
Well, I actually started when I was 14, started to chop. My father was a champion tree climber, and this year it's actually 40 years since I first stepped onto Brisbane Showground, so this is just a milestone for me.
Well, there you go, that's great. So it's traditionally a family sport, intergenerational sport. So what other members of your family competed in the sport?
That's right, I'm fourth generation. My father was a tree climber, he was before me. Then I had a grandfather that was a champion axeman by the name of John, and then I had a great-grandfather, Carl. He actually was one of the founding members of the Queensland Axemen Association.
Well, that's good, a long and proud history in the sport. So, Bruce, there's always a moment in somebody's sporting career that sets them on the path to becoming a champion. How did you figure out, and when did you know that you had the goods to become a champion?
I knew from a very early, at 14 I knew that I wanted to woodchop. And I'd heard so many stories about all the great champions. At 14 I wanted to be a world champion. So I started training. I won my first novice at 14. I won my first 10-inch block at 14. The first foot block at 15. The first open championship at 17.
Where was that?
Caboolture. I won that, went on to win it 12 times. I won my first Queensland title at Toowoomba when I was 18. And one of my proudest achievements, I think I made the 15-inch stand block champion in Sydney when I was 16, and then from then on it just became an obsession.
Well, tell us about that. So when you knew that you were going to get into that 15 championship, how did you feel about that?
Well, I started off, my father started to train me, and he said to me, I can only take you so far. So then I got involved with Elwyn Griggs, who was a former world champion and won the 15-inch underhand in Sydney. So I spent 3 years with him, and he caught up. I guess he put me 10 years in front of anybody else. He taught me all the finer points that I would have never picked up unless someone actually shows you. You might have picked them up over a period of time, but what we never had then, what the young axemen have got now, is the internet and film, and we can watch things over and over again. We never had that back then. We only had to rely on what people showed us or the odd photograph. That's the difference between now and then.
Well, they call Sydney the Wimbledon of wood chopping. You've won there how many times?
I went on to win the world stand block in Sydney 4 times, the 15-inch block. I won the 13-inch block 5 times, but the 15-inch block was the pinnacle of, I think, any axeman's success. I won it 4 times. I cut second in it 7 times. I made the final first when I was 16, and then I went back and cut second in it when I was 17 and 19, and then I had to wait till I was 23 to win it. I wanted to always be the youngest axeman to win it.
So your coach, you mentioned Elwyn Griggs, was he still around at that stage?
Elwyn watched me. He never actually saw me win. I won my first championship in Sydney the year after he passed away.
Right, well, given that was the case, what was the event? I mean, obviously the 15-inch block was the event that you most wanted to win.
I think the 15-inch block in Sydney is the pinnacle of success, but the 12-inch block in Brisbane, the 12-inch stand block, I've won that 12 times. It's a harder. I won it after I won the 15-inch in Sydney. It's actually a harder event to win. Being smaller, there's more axemen I think can take to it. Different size axemen. Where 15 in Sydney needs a lot of muscle, a lot of strength, but the smaller block in Brisbane can be won with speed and agility. That was the difference. Pat Hooper was a master of those small foot blocks. He could cut them unbelievable.
All right. Well, then, what was the win that you were most proud of? What was the one that you thought that's it?
I had several in my lifetime. The first one in Brisbane, I won the 13-inch world block in Brisbane when I was 21. That stuck in my mind because no one gave me a thought. I watched them interview all the other axemen in it, and the reporters never come anywhere near me. So I thought that was the first thing that burred me up, that I wanted to win and beat Gary Ewart, David Foster, and there was a lot of good axemen in it, so that really pumped me up.
Well, with being a champion, there's always heartbreak in sport. What was that heartbreaking moment for you, and how did you handle it?
But I thought about this, and I thought there was never heartbreak. Wood chopping and any sport, you either win or you lose. But the biggest heartbreak in my life, in the sporting career, I'd won the 15-inch block twice in Sydney, and I went back to win it again in 1992. We were right before we were ready. My wife was ready to give birth, and we lost a baby. There was a cord caught round her neck, and she died a month before I went to Sydney. I hadn't trained that much, and my wife said to me, "You better put this behind you and go to Sydney and see how you go." And I went and I won the double, the 13-inch and the 15-inch. The only time I'd won the two, and that was the biggest heartbreak. But well, that's what I think was.
Okay, all right, well that's fairly understandable.
Yeah.
In our sport, or in all sports, there's rivalries. Who was the axeman that you were most concerned about when you went out in the competition?
Three axemen that stick in my mind. There's several, all champions remain in my mind. Greg Lovell, Pat Hooper. I chopped against Pat Hooper every weekend. He was one of the greatest axemen I've ever seen. He never missed a blow. He never mishit. 3 drives and they always come off. You had to be so switched on to beat him every weekend. The other one was Gary Hewitt. He was my idol. I just idolised Gary Hewitt. He was just so big, so strong. But even I tried to do what he did. Young bloke, I could go up to and talk to him at 14 and 15 and he'd never chase you away. He'd always say good day to you. That's what I try to do with the younger axemen now. But the main rival, the one that we got under one another's skin, we're mates today, but back in the day was David Foster. He was so big and so powerful that I just wanted to beat him. And I think because he used to say I was a little short, stumpy so-and-so, and he wanted to flog me. So we had this thing about beating one another, and that drove us to great heights, I think.
That rivalry went on for years and years and years.
Yeah, it did. It went on from the best part of... I stayed with him when I was 17, and he looked after me like a king. Gary Hewitt and I both stayed with him. And then it went from looking up to him to being hatred for him because he was the one thing that stood in me way. So it went on right through. But we had, a couple of years ago, we had dinner together and had a great time.
Well, that's good. It's always good to get that out of the way. Now, you've been around for a while in wood chopping arena. How do the young guys today compare to what I'll call your era and the axemen that you knew of yesteryear? How do they compare?
Well, the greatest thing about... I'm 54, so the greatest thing about me, I've seen some of the greatest axemen. My father, Lenny Bennett, I chopped against Len. I've seen the greatest axemen in history. What I haven't seen chop, I've talked to them because they were just a bit older. Now I'm coming into an era where I'm watching all the young blokes coming through in their 20s, and they're all fantastic. The difference that defines us between them, there's no one better now than what we were, and there's no one worse. There's still terrific axemen, but they mix more with one another. Back in my day, we didn't mix with one. We didn't. At the end of the show, they might have had a beer together, but they didn't mix with one another. They didn't, not as much as they do now. They're pretty chummy now, but back in the day, none of us mixed that close. We weren't that close to one another.
Well, there you go, Bruce Winkle. Thanks for spending a few minutes with the champion.
Thanks for the time, Simon. It's been great.